Dust swirls through a forgotten town as a scarred bounty hunter rides in, his past as heavy as the gun on his hip. He came for justice, but found something unexpected in the eyes of a widow with healing hands and secrets of her own. When danger threatens their newfound connection, will love be strong enough to overcome the shadows of the past? If you love stories of redemption under the western sky, hit that like button, subscribe for more tales of the heart, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. The West was never this romantic. The wind carried the dust across Red Hollow like whispered secrets, swift, silent, inevitable. It settled on windowsills and beneath fingernails, a fine copper veil that coated everything and everyone. When Cole Maddox rode in on his dun horse, the same dust clung to him as if claiming him for the town. His silhouette emerged from the haze, tall in the saddle, shoulders curved slightly inward as though carrying an invisible weight. He dismounted outside Thornton's general store, boots meeting earth with a quiet finality. The leather of his holster creaked as he adjusted his stance, eyes narrowing against the late afternoon sun. A scar bisected his left eyebrow, crawling down to the curve of his cheekbone, a jagged lightning strike against weathered skin. In his pocket rested a silver pocket watch that hadn't kept proper time in years, though he wound it faithfully each morning. Red Hollow spread before him, a scattered collection of wooden buildings that seemed to grow reluctantly from the parched earth. The town appeared as exhausted as its inhabitants, worn down by sun and circumstance. The saloon's faded sign swung. In the breeze, letters barely legible beneath layers of dust and neglect. Cole studied it, feeling the rhythm of the place settling into his bones. Towns like this had their own heartbeat, their own breathing patterns. He had learned to listen. For them, what he sought was always the same: information, a face, a name, a direction. Then he would ride out, leaving nothing behind but hoofprints that the dust would soon reclaim. This time would be no different, or so he told himself as he led his horse toward the livery stable, unaware of the eyes watching from the widow's apothecary across the street. Evelyn Hayes pressed her fingertips against the glass window of her small apothecary, leaving faint half-moons in the film of dust. Through the smudged pane, she observed the stranger's arrival with measured curiosity. New faces in Red Hollow were rare enough to note, but seldom worth remembering. Most drifted through like tumbleweeds, purposeless, temporary. This man moved differently, deliberate. Each step placed with intention, as if testing the ground beneath him for traps. She recognized the vigilance in his posture, the careful scanning of doorways and rooflines. It was the alertness of someone who had learned that safety was a luxury, not a right. Inside her shop, dried herbs hung from the ceiling in neat bundles, filling the air with earthy fragrances. Sage, lavender, and rosemary, mingling with the sharper notes of witch hazel and pine resin. Glass jars lined the shelves containing powders, tinctures, and salves she prepared with methodical precision. Order amid chaos had become her sanctuary. She turned from the window, tucking a strand of auburn hair behind her ear. Her hands, once soft, now calloused from years of work, smoothed down her simple blue dress. 3 years a widow, and still the town looked at her with a mixture of pity and suspicion. A woman alone was always suspect, especially one who knew the properties of plants that could heal or harm. The bell above her door chimed, announcing a customer. Evelyn composed her features into the pleasant mask she wore for the townsfolk, revealing nothing while appearing open. But when she turned, the stranger from the street filled the doorframe, his presence immediately changing the atmosphere of her small shop. "Ma'am," he said, removing his hat. His voice was like stone rolling over stone, rough but somehow musical. "I need something for a horse with a tender hoof." Their eyes met, brief as a match strike. She saw no judgment in his gaze, no pity, only a direct assessment that noted her as she was, not as the town's whispers defined her. Something unfamiliar fluttered beneath her ribs. "I have just the thing," Evelyn replied, her voice steadier than she felt. She reached for a jar on the upper shelf, aware of his eyes following her movements. "Apply this to the frog of the hoof, morning and night. Should ease any inflammation." His fingers brushed hers as he took the jar, calloused skin against calloused skin, working hands meeting working hands. A moment of recognition passed between them, wordless and profound. "Much obliged," he said, placing coins on the counter, more than the salve was worth. When she opened her mouth to correct him, he had already turned to leave, settling his hat back on his head with a slight nod. The door closed behind him. Evelyn remained motionless, watching his silhouette recede through the dusty glass. Outside, the sun dipped lower on the horizon, painting Red Hollow in shades of amber and gold. For the first time in 3 years, she felt a subtle shift in the air around her, like the first hint of rain after a long drought. That evening found Cole in the corner of the Iron Horse Saloon, nursing a glass of whiskey that tasted more of dust than grain. The wanted poster lay folded in his inner pocket, creased along familiar lines. Jacob Winters, cattle rustler and confidence man, last seen heading toward Red Hollow after a failed scheme in Tucson. $500, dead or alive. Though Cole preferred the latter. Dead men told no tales about those they'd wronged, offered no restitution to those they'd robbed. The saloon buzzed with the usual sounds, cards slapping against felt, murmured conversations, the occasional burst of forced laughter. Piano notes trickled through the smoke-filled air, disjointed and melancholy. Cole observed it all from behind. Hooded eyes, cataloguing faces, listening for names or mentions of strangers. Sheriff Mills had been less than helpful earlier that afternoon. "Haven't seen anyone matching that description," he'd said, barely glancing at the poster. "Red Hollows, a quiet place. We like to keep it that way." The warning had been clear enough. Bounty hunters weren't welcome, especially ones asking questions about men who might not want to be found. Cole's gaze drifted to the bartender, a heavy-set man with fingers like sausages and eyes that missed nothing. If anyone knew about newcomers to Red Hollow, it would be him. But as Cole contemplated approaching him, the saloon doors swung open, momentarily silencing the room. Evelyn Hayes stood in the threshold, a basket covered with cloth tucked under. One arm. She ignored the stairs, walking directly to the bar. The room resumed its noise, though several glances followed her progress. Cole noted how spaces cleared around her, how conversations paused and resumed once she had passed. "Evening, Thomas," she addressed the bartender. "I've brought that tonic for your mother's joints." "Much appreciated, Mrs. Hayes," the bartender replied, taking the small bottle she offered. He slid payment across the counter, which she tucked into her pocket without counting. Cole watched their exchange from the shadows, intrigued by the careful respect the bartender showed her despite the obvious discomfort of those nearby. As she turned to leave, their eyes met across the room. Recognition flickered between them like a candle flame in a draught, brief, tenuous, but unmistakably there. She paused, then inclined her head slightly before continuing toward the door. As she passed a table of card players, one man, red-faced and whiskey-bowled, reached out to catch her sleeve. "Why don't you stay a while, Widow Hayes?" he slurred. "Might do you good to spend time with the living instead of all them dried up." "Plants." Cole tensed, hand instinctively moving toward his holster. But Evelyn merely extracted her arm with practiced precision, her expression unchanged. "The plants have better manners, Mr. Daniels," she replied, loud enough for those nearby to hear, "and they serve a purpose." Laughter rippled through the saloon as she departed, leaving the man flushed with embarrassment. Cole relaxed his posture, but kept his eyes on the door long after she'd gone. There was something about the widow that intrigued him, a stillness at her center that reminded him of deep water. Later, as he questioned the bartender about Jacob Winters, Cole found himself asking about her instead. The widow? Keeps to herself mostly, Thomas offered, wiping a glass with a questionably clean rag. Husband was the town doctor, till fever took him 3 years back. She learned his trade, sorts out folks' ailments now. Some find it unnatural, a woman knowing such things. He shrugged. Saved my mother's leg last winter, though. Good enough for me. Cole nodded, filing the information away like the careful hunter he was. His quarry might be Jacob Winters, but it was the widow Hayes who occupied his thoughts as he made his way to the small room he'd rented above the livery, her eyes steady as a compass needle, her voice soft yet unyielding as the distant horizon. He placed his gun belt on the bedside table and removed the silver pocket watch from his vest. Its face gleamed in the lamplight, hands frozen at 3:27. Cole wound it methodically, knowing it would never tell true time again. Some things, once broken, stayed that way. Others found new purposes. He wasn't sure yet which category the widow fell into, or for that matter which contained him. The morning rose pallid and hazy, sun struggling through layers of dust suspended in the air. Evelyn moved about her garden behind the apothecary, harvesting herbs in the cool hours before the heat became unbearable. Her fingers worked methodically, separating leaves from stems, sorting them into the woven basket at her side. The garden was her creation. Rows of medicinal plants coaxed from the reluctant soil through stubborn determination. In a town where little flourished, her garden stood as an act of defiance. Jonathan had taught her the healing properties of plants, but the garden itself was her own invention, begun in the dark months after his death, when she needed something to tend, something that required her continued existence. The sound of approaching footsteps drew her attention. She straightened, wiping soil-stained hands on her apron, as Cole Maddox appeared around the corner of the building. He paused at the edge of her garden, as if hesitant to cross an invisible boundary. "Mr. Maddox," she acknowledged, surprising him with the use of his name. "News travels fast in small towns," he observed. "It's all some people have to trade." She gestured to the jar he held. "Your horse's hoof, is the salve helping?" He nodded, turning the empty jar in his hands. "Came to thank you, and perhaps to purchase something for myself. Shoulder gives me trouble sometimes. Old injury." Evelyn studied him, noting how he favored his right side slightly. "I have a liniment that might help. Would you like to come inside?" They entered the apothecary through the back door, moving from bright sunlight into the cool dimness of her workroom. Dried herbs hung from rafters, and the air smelled of rosemary and beeswax. A large wooden table dominated the space, its surface scarred and stained from years of preparation. Cole remained near the doorway, watching as she selected ingredients from various jars and bottles. "You're hunting someone," she said without looking up, measuring oil into a small pot. His silence confirmed her statement. She added dried arnica flowers to the oil and placed the pot on a small stove to heat. "Red Hollow doesn't get many visitors," she continued, stirring the mixture. "And those who come usually want something, or someone." "Does that trouble you?" he asked, moving closer to observe her work. Her hands paused momentarily before resuming their rhythm. "It depends on your intentions. I'm looking for a man who stole from people who couldn't afford the loss," Cole said, surprising himself with the admission. "Nothing more." Evelyn nodded, transferring the warm oil to a small blue jar. "And after you find him?" The question hung between them, unexpectedly intimate. Cole had never considered the after of his hunts, only the completion. One name crossed off, another taken up. Movement without destination. "I haven't thought that far ahead," he admitted, the truth unfamiliar on his tongue. She pressed. a cork into the jar and handed it to him. Their fingers brushed again, lingering a moment longer than necessary. "Apply it twice daily," she instructed. "It works better with heat." Cole reached for his money pouch, but she shook her head. "Consider it an exchange," she said. "Information for remedy." He studied her face, the fine lines at the corners of her eyes, the determined set of her mouth, the quiet intelligence in her gaze. Something shifted in his chest, like a key turning in a long, unused lock. "Thank you," he said, tucking the jar into his pocket. He paused at the doorway. "The saloon, last night. Does that happen often?" A shadow crossed her face. People fear what they don't understand, and a woman who lives alone, who knows the properties of plants? She shrugged. "It makes them uncomfortable. Yet you stay." "This is my home," she said simply. "Where else would I go?" Cole nodded, understanding something fundamental about Evelyn Hayes in that moment. They were different in many ways, but in this they were alike. They both carried their homes within themselves, having learned that external shelters were too easily lost. He left without saying more, the blue jar a small weight in his pocket. As he walked away, he felt her watching him from the doorway, and for the first time in years, being observed didn't raise his hackles. Instead, it felt strangely like recognition. Evelyn dreamed of fire that night. She woke gasping, sheets twisted around her legs, the phantom smell of smoke lingering in her nostrils. The old nightmare, Jonathan's fever, his skin burning beneath her hands as she tried desperately to cool him, knowing even as she worked that she was losing the battle. Outside, the wind had picked up, carrying dust and memories in equal measure. She rose and moved to the window, pressing her forehead against the cool glass. The street below was empty, save for a stray dog trotting purposefully towards some midnight mission. The saloon lights still glowed, spilling yellow rectangles onto the dirt road. Her gaze drifted to the livery stable, where she knew Cole Maddox slept. What ghosts visited him in the darkness? What fires had shaped him into the man who moved through the world with such careful vigilance? She touched the silver locket at her throat, the only piece of jewelry she still wore. Inside was a small portrait of Jonathan, painted in happier days. Sometimes the face within seemed to belong to a stranger. Other times, the loss felt as fresh as yesterday. Evelyn returned to bed but did not sleep. Instead, she watched shadows move across the ceiling, remembering how she had come to Red Hollow as a young bride, full of hope and plans. Jonathan had been older, established, respected. The town doctor taking a wife from back east had been cause for celebration. Those early years had been good, learning his trade at his side, establishing their home, being accepted by the community. Then came the fever that swept through Red Hollow, taking a dozen souls before it burned itself out. Jonathan had worked tirelessly, saving many, but ultimately unable to save himself. In the aftermath, the town's attitude toward her had shifted. Without Jonathan's protection, she became something else in their eyes, a curiosity at best, a threat at worst. The knowledge she had acquired became suspect. The independence she demonstrated made them uneasy. Yet some had stood by her. Mrs. Thornton from the general store, Sheriff Mills in his gruff way, Thomas the bartender after she saved his mother's leg from infection. Enough support that she could remain, if not fully accepted. Morning found her tired but resolved. She dressed in her simple blue dress, one of 3 she owned, and arranged her hair in its practical knot. As she prepared to open the apothecary, a movement outside caught her attention. Cole Maddox stood across the street, speaking with Elias Thornton, the general store owner. Their conversation appeared tense, Thornton gesturing emphatically while Cole listened with narrowed eyes. Finally, Thornton pointed toward the north edge of town before retreating into his store. Cole remained motionless for a long moment, staring in the direction Thornton had indicated. Then, seeming to feel her gaze, he turned toward the apothecary. Their eyes met through the dusty window. He touched the brim of his hat in acknowledgement, a gesture so subtle it might have been missed by anyone not watching closely. Evelyn felt heat rise to her cheeks, embarrassed at being caught observing him. But rather than turning away, she raised her hand in return greeting. A small act of courage, acknowledging the tenuous connection forming between them. He nodded once, decisively, then strode toward his horse, purpose evident in every line of his body. She knew without being told that he had found what he was. Hunting. A strange hollowness opened within her at the thought. Soon he would complete his mission and ride out of Red Hollow, leaving nothing behind but hoofprints in the dust, just as she had predicted, just as it should be. Why then did the prospect fill her with such unexpected sorrow? Cole tracked Jacob Winters to an abandoned silver mine north of town. The confrontation was brief, anticlimactic. Winters surrendered without resistance, a shell of the dangerous man described in the wanted poster. Years of running had hollowed him out, leaving little but bones and regret. "You gonna kill me?" Winters asked as Cole bound his wrists. "No," Cole replied. "You're worth more alive. People you swindled deserve to see justice done." They rode back to Red Hollow in silence, the setting sun casting long shadows before them. Cole deposited Winters at the sheriff's office, collected a receipt for the bounty, and walked to the telegraph office to arrange for prisoner transport. Routine actions, performed countless times before. Yet something felt different, a restlessness beneath his skin that had nothing to do with his completed mission. As Cole crossed the street toward the Iron Horse Saloon, intending to celebrate his success with a glass of whiskey, he overheard three men conversing outside the barber shop. "Seen him coming out of the widow's place again this morning," one said, voice pitched low but carrying in the evening air. "Third time this week." "Always knew she was trouble," another replied. "Husband barely cold in his grave, and she's taken up with a bounty hunter." "Fitting, though, ain't it?" the third added with a sneer. "Her with her potions and poultices, him with his gun, both of 'em dealing in death one way or another." Cole's hand twitched toward his holster before he mastered the impulse. Instead, he changed direction, walking directly toward the men. They fell silent as he approached, expressions shifting from surprise to wariness. "Evening, gentlemen," he said, voice deceptively mild. "Couldn't help overhearing your conversation." The largest of the three straightened, attempting bravado. "Just passing the time." Cole nodded, as if considering this. "The thing about small towns," he said conversationally, "is how a person's worth gets measured by others' opinions rather than their actions." He leaned slightly closer. "Mrs. Hayes has treated my injured shoulder. Nothing more. But if I hear more talk like what I just heard, we might have a problem." He didn't raise his voice or make explicit threats, but something in his eyes caused the men to step back. "No offense meant," one muttered. "None taken," Cole replied with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Yet." He continued toward the saloon, aware of their stares burning into his back. It had been foolish to intervene, calling more attention to his visits to Evelyn rather than less. Yet the unfairness of their judgment had provoked him in a way few things did anymore. Inside the saloon, Cole ordered whiskey and took it to his usual corner table. The bartender, Thomas, brought the bottle instead of just a glass. "A house," he said. "Heard you brought in Winters. Town owes you for that." Cole raised an eyebrow. "Thought bounty hunters weren't welcome here." Thomas shrugged. "Winters cleaned out half the town with his investment scheme last year. Took my cousin for everything he had." He hesitated, then added more quietly, "And for what it's worth, not everyone thinks ill of Mrs. Hayes. Some of us remember how many lives she and the doctor saved." Cole nodded thanks, both for the whiskey and the information. As Thomas returned to the bar, the saloon doors swung open and Sheriff Mills entered, scanning the room until he spotted Cole. "Maddox," he said, approaching the table. "Transport. For your prisoner arrives day after tomorrow. Thought you'd want to know." Cole gestured to the empty chair across from him. "Join me?" The sheriff hesitated, then sat, accepting the offered glass of whiskey. "Didn't expect Winters to come. In so easy. Men get tired of running," Cole said. "Eventually." They drank in silence for a moment before Mills spoke again. "You moving on after this?" The question shouldn't have given Cole pause. His answer had always been yes. One job completed, another waiting, yet he found himself staring into his glass, uncertain. "Haven't decided," he finally answered. Mills studied him over the rim of his whiskey. "Town could use a deputy, if you're looking to stay in one place for a while." Cole nearly laughed at the suggestion. Him, a lawman, enforcing the very rules he'd spent years skirting the edges of. But something in the sheriff's expression stopped him. "Why offer that to someone you barely know?" he asked. "I know enough," Mills replied. "Seen how you handle yourself, how you treat others." He drained his glass and stood. "Think about it. Offer stands till the transport arrives." After the sheriff departed, Cole remained at the table, turning his glass slowly between his fingers. Stay in Red Hollow? The idea should have seemed ludicrous, yet it nibbled at the edges of his consciousness like a persistent mouse. His gaze drifted to the window, where the last light of day illuminated the apothecary across the street. A lamp burned in the upstairs window, Evelyn's private quarters. Was she preparing for bed, reading, mixing remedies by lamplight? Cole pulled out his silver pocket watch, opening the case to reveal the perpetually incorrect face. For years, he had wound it faithfully each morning, knowing it would never tell true time. A Voul's ritual, perhaps, or the action of a man unwilling to accept that some things once broken remain so. He snapped the watch closed and tucked it away, decision forming like a crystal in solution, not yet solid, but taking shape with each passing moment. The shot came at dusk 3 days later, as Cole was leaving the sheriff's office. One moment he was stepping into the street. The next, fire bloomed in his left side, dropping him to one knee. Instinct had him rolling toward cover as a second shot kicked up dust where he had stood. From the alley beside the telegraph office came shouts and a scuffle. Sheriff Mills emerged, dragging a man whose nose streamed blood onto the street. "Got him!" Mills called. "You hit?" Cole pressed a hand to his side, feeling warm wetness soaking through his shirt. "Grazed," he lied, the pain sharpening his vision to knife-point clarity. "Who is he?" "Winter's partner," Mills answered, securing the shooter's hands behind his back. "Must have followed you to town, waiting for his chance." Cole nodded, remaining in the shadow of the building as Mills marched his prisoner toward the jail. Only when they had disappeared inside did he allow himself to slump against the wall, breath coming in short, controlled gasps. The wound wasn't immediately life-threatening. The bullet had entered his side and exited cleanly, but blood loss would become a problem soon. The doctor who had treated his previous injuries was a 3-day ride away. That left one option. Twilight had deepened to full dark by the time Cole reached the apothecary. No light showed from within, but a thin yellow line gleamed beneath Evelyn's upstairs door. He leaned against the building, gathering strength, then raised his hand to knock. The door opened on his second attempt, revealing Evelyn in a simple dressing gown, her hair loose around her shoulders. Surprise registered on her face, quickly replaced by alarm as she took in his pallor and the hand pressed to his side. "Inside," she said, moving to support him. "Quickly." She helped him up the narrow staircase to her private quarters, a modest sitting room with a small kitchen alcove, a bedroom visible through a half-open door. Books lined one wall. Dried herbs and flowers hung from the ceiling beams. The space smelled of lavender and wood smoke. "Here!" She guided him to a chair by the fire. "Let me see." Cole removed his hand, revealing the blood-soaked fabric of his shirt. Evelyn's expression remained neutral, but he caught the quick intake of breath that betrayed her concern. "Bullet wound," she said, not a question. "Clean through," he confirmed. "Not my first." "Nor your last, I imagine," she replied dryly, moving to heat water on the stove. "Remove your shirt. There are clean linens in that chest. Spread them on the floor beneath you." Cole complied with effort, each movement sending fresh pain radiating through his side. The wound looked worse bared to the lamplight, an angry, red hole surrounded by bruising that had already begun to mottle his skin in shades of purple and blue. Evelyn returned with hot water, clean cloths, and a wooden box of supplies. She knelt beside him, all business now, her earlier discomposure hidden beneath professional focus. "This will hurt," she warned, cleaning the wound with a solution that smelled of alcohol and herbs. Cole gritted his teeth but made no sound as she worked. Her hands moved with sure efficiency, cleaning, examining, applying salves and bandages. Jonathan Hayes had taught her well. "You're fortunate," she said, securing the bandage around his torso. "Another inch to the right, and we would be having a very different conversation." "Or none at all," he added, attempting humor. She didn't smile. "Why come to me? Sheriff Mills could have fetched the barber. He handles most injuries here since Jonathan died." Cole met her eyes, finding concern beneath the professional detachment. "I trust you," he said simply. The admission hung between them, weighty as a stone in still water. Evelyn's hands paused in their work, and for a moment the only sound was the crackling of the fire and their synchronized breathing. "You should rest," she finally said, rising to her feet. "The couch will do for tonight. I'll check the wound again in the morning." Cole caught her wrist as she turned away. "Thank you." She looked down at his hand on her skin, then back to his face. Something passed between them, unspoken yet unmistakable. A boundary crossed, a possibility acknowledged. "You're welcome," she replied softly, gently removing her wrist from his grasp. "Try to sleep." Later, as Cole lay on her narrow couch, the fire burning low in the grate, he listened to her moving about in the bedroom. For 7 years, he had slept with one hand near his gun, waking at the slightest sound. Tonight, despite the pain in his side and the unfamiliar surroundings, he felt a curious peace settling over him like a blanket. In the bedroom, Evelyn stood at her window, looking out at the silent street below. The man sleeping in her sitting room was dangerous, to her reputation, perhaps to her heart. Yet when he had appeared at her door, wounded and vulnerable, turning him away had never occurred to her. She touched the bandages on her table, still stained with his blood. His trust was a gift she hadn't expected and wasn't sure she deserved. But it warmed something long cold within her, a feeling so unfamiliar she hesitated to name it. Outside, the wind sang its lonely song through Red Hollow's empty streets. Inside, 2 people accustomed to solitude fell asleep beneath the same roof, separated by a thin wall and years of careful isolation, both beginning to question whether such barriers were protection or prison. Morning arrived with a gentle persistence, sunlight filtering through Evelyn's faded curtains. She had risen early, checking on her patient before he woke. Cole's breathing had been steady, his skin warm but not feverish. Good signs. She had left water and clean bandages beside him before slipping downstairs to open the apothecary. The day passed slowly, customers few and far between. Most came for simple remedies. Mrs. Thornton for her rheumatism tincture, young Billy, Carson, for salve for his sister's rash. If they noticed the unusual tension in Evelyn's posture or the frequent glances she cast toward the ceiling, they didn't mention it. By mid-afternoon, concern had begun to gnaw at her. Cole hadn't appeared. downstairs, and she hadn't heard movement above. After Mrs. Peterson left with her headache powder, Evelyn hung the closed sign on the door and hurried upstairs. She found Cole seated by the window, watching the street below. He had managed to put on his shirt, though it hung unbuttoned, over fresh bandages. He must have changed them himself. His gun belt lay across his lap, and he was methodically cleaning his revolver, pieces arranged neatly on a cloth beside him. "You should be resting," she admonished, hiding her relief behind professional concern. He looked up, those keen eyes taking in her flushed cheeks and the tension around her mouth. "Been resting all day," he replied. "Getting restless." "Restlessness leads to bleeding," she countered, moving to examine his bandages. "Let me see." He submitted to her inspection without protest, setting aside his work. The wound looked clean, no signs of infection. His skin felt cooler than it had that morning. Another good sign. "Healing well," she pronounced, "but you still need rest." "I've had worse," he said. Then at her skeptical look added, "though not many better cared for." The compliment brought unexpected heat to her cheeks. She busied herself rearranging supplies to hide her reaction. "Are you hungry?" she asked. "I was about to prepare supper." "Don't go to any trouble." "It's no trouble," she replied. "I need to eat as well." They fell into a comfortable silence as she moved about the small kitchen alcove, slicing bread, stirring a pot of stew that had been simmering since morning. Cole reassembled his revolver with practiced movements, each piece fitting perfectly into its place. When he finished, he watched her work, the domesticity of the scene striking both of them as strangely natural. They ate at her small table by the window, the stew simple but filling. Outside, Red Hollow settled into evening routines. Lamps being lit, saloon doors opening to welcome the night's first customers, a dog barking somewhere in the distance. "Sheriff offered me a job," Cole said abruptly. "Deputy." Evelyn paused, spoon halfway to her mouth. "Are you considering it?" He shrugged, then winced slightly at the movement. "Never stayed in one place long enough to consider such things." "What's kept you moving?" she asked, setting down her spoon. Cole was silent for so long, she thought he might not answer. When he did, his voice was low, as if the words were being dredged from some deep, hidden place. "After the war, home didn't feel like home anymore. Started tracking deserters for the army. I was good at it. Then bounties. One job led to another." He touched the scar on his face absently. "Easier to leave than to stay. Fewer complications." "And now?" she prompted gently. His eyes met hers across the table. "Now, I'm not so sure." The moment stretched between them, taut with unspoken possibilities. Evelyn looked away first, rising to clear their bowls. "There's apple preserves, if you'd like something sweet," she offered, her back to him as she washed dishes in the small basin. "Evelyn," he said, just her name, but something in his tone made her still her hands in the water. She turned, slowly. He had risen from the table and stood watching her, his expression more open than she had yet seen it. "I don't want to bring you trouble," he said. "Those men in town, what they're saying about us." "People will always talk," she interrupted, drying her hands on her apron. "I stopped listening years ago." "Still," he persisted, "my being here doesn't help your standing." She laughed then, a sound so rarely heard in those rooms that it seemed to surprise them both. "My standing? I'm already the witch woman who makes potions and lives alone. What more damage could your presence possibly do?" A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "When you put it that way. Besides," she added more softly, "you're injured. Where else would you go?" He took a step toward her, then another, until he stood close enough that she could see the flecks of amber in his hazel eyes. "Is that the only reason you're letting me stay?" The question hung in the air between them, honest and dangerous. Evelyn felt the walls she had built around herself since Jonathan's death tremble slightly. "No," she admitted. "It's not." Cole nodded, accepting her answer without pushing for more. They stood facing each other in the small kitchen, the evening light painting everything in soft gold. Neither moved to close the remaining distance between them, yet something had been acknowledged. A door opened that could not easily be closed. Again. Eventually, Evelyn stepped back, retrieving a jar from the shelf. "Your shoulder, the liniment I gave you. Does it help?" "It does," he confirmed, understanding her need to return to safer ground. "Good. I'll check your bandages again before bed." They spent the remainder of the evening in companionable silence, Evelyn reading by lamplight, Cole cleaning his gun a second time, though it didn't need it. Occasionally their eyes would meet over the book or across the room, and something, wordless, would pass between them, a current of understanding that required no voice. Later, as Evelyn changed his bandages, her fingers gentle against his skin, Cole caught her hand in his. He pressed something small and cold into her palm, his silver pocket watch, its case gleaming in the lamplight. "It doesn't keep time," he said, as she looked at him questioningly. "Hasn't since Shiloh, but I've carried it ever since." Evelyn opened the case, revealing the watch face frozen at 3:27. "Why give it to me?" "Because you should know," he said simply, "that some things, once started, can't be stopped, even when they seem broken." She closed her fingers around the watch, understanding the gift for what it was, not just an object, but a piece of himself, previously guarded and now offered freely. A trust as profound as the one that had brought him to her door, bleeding but certain of his welcome. "I'll keep it safe," she promised, the weight of the watch in her hand somehow lighter than the weight of his gaze on her face. That night, they again slept separated by the thin wall between sitting room and bedroom. But something had changed, a shift as subtle and significant as the first green shoot breaking through winter soil. Neither knew yet what might grow from such a beginning, but both felt the quiet certainty that whatever came next, they would face it no longer alone. A week passed. Cole's wound healed gradually under Evelyn's care, the angry red giving way to pink, then to the beginning of a scar that would join the collection mapped across his body. He had moved from her apartment to a proper room at the boarding house, though he still took evening meals with her when the apothecary closed. The town watched their growing companionship with mixed reactions. Some, like Mrs. Thornton and Sheriff Mills, nodded approval when they saw Cole escorting Evelyn to church on Sunday morning. Others whispered behind hands when the pair walked together through town, their bodies never touching but somehow occupying the same space. "You don't have to accompany me everywhere," Evelyn said one afternoon as they returned from the general store, her basket full of supplies. "People will talk." "Let them," Cole replied, taking the basket from her hands. "Besides, I'm still on Sheriff Mills' payroll as a temporary deputy until I decide about his offer." The badge pinned to Cole's vest was new, but it sat there with surprising naturalness. Evelyn had noticed how it changed the way some townsfolk regarded him, with respect rather than wariness. Authority agreed with him, though he wore it lightly. As they approached the apothecary, Cole paused, looking toward the hills beyond town, where wildflowers had begun to bloom after recent rains, splashes of color against the dusty landscape. "Would you show me which ones have medicinal properties?" he asked. "Tomorrow, perhaps." The invitation was casual, but Evelyn recognized it for what it was, a desire to know more of her world, to understand the knowledge that defined her. "I'd like that," she replied. The next day dawned clear and cool, perfect for walking. They set out early, Evelyn carrying a small basket for specimens, Cole with his revolver at his hip, a precaution he never abandoned. The town fell away behind them as they climbed into the foothills, following a narrow game trail that wound through scrub and stone. Evelyn moved with surprising agility over the rough terrain, stopping occasionally to point out plants of interest. The yellow flowers that could bring down fever, the spiny leaves that numbed pain when properly prepared, the inconspicuous weed that helped wounds close cleanly. Cole listened attentively, his hunter's memory cataloguing each plant and its purpose. He watched her hands as she demonstrated how to harvest each specimen, the sureness of her movements, the reverence with which she handled even the simplest weed. "How did you learn all this?" he asked as they rested beside a small stream, sharing water from his canteen. "Some from Jonathan," she replied, tilting her face to the sun. "He was an educated doctor, but respected the old ways too. After he died—" She paused, finding the words. "After I had his books, but they only taught so much. The rest came from necessity and observation, trial and error." "You taught yourself," Cole said, admiration evident in his voice. She nodded. "The plants speak if you know how to listen. Each has its nature, its purpose, like people." "And what's my nature?" he asked, only half joking. Evelyn studied him thoughtfully. "Protective," she finally said. "Strong, but not hard. Adaptable, like the juniper that grows from rock, but still offers shelter and medicine." The assessment touched something deep within him. No one had ever seen him so clearly or described him with such care. "And yours?" he returned softly. She looked away, suddenly self-conscious. "I'm just a widow who knows plants." "No," Cole said, reaching to turn her face gently back toward his. "You're the woman who heals what others would call beyond saving, who creates life from barren soil, who sees value in things others discard." His hand lingered on her cheek, rough calluses against soft skin. For a breathless moment, the stream's gentle babble was the only sound between them. Then, with deliberate slowness, Cole leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was tentative at first, a question rather than a demand. When Evelyn responded, her hand coming up to rest against his chest, it deepened into something more certain, a conversation without words, an answer to questions neither had fully articulated. When they finally parted, Evelyn's cheeks were flushed, her eyes bright with emotions long dormant. Cole's usually steady hands trembled slightly as he tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "I didn't plan that," he admitted. "Didn't you?" she asked, smiling faintly. He chuckled, the sound rusty but genuine. "Maybe I did." They remained by the stream a while longer, talking of simple things, childhood memories, favorite foods, books they had read. Ordinary exchanges that felt extraordinary for two people accustomed to guarding their histories. As afternoon shadows lengthened, they gathered their belongings and started back toward town. Halfway down the trail, Cole stopped suddenly, his posture alert. "What is it?" Evelyn asked. He shook his head, signaling for quiet. His hand moved to his holster as he scanned the surrounding brush. After a moment, he relaxed slightly. "Thought I heard something?" he explained. "Probably nothing." But his vigilance remained heightened as they descended, his body positioned, slightly ahead of hers as if to shield her from unseen threats. The easy openness of their hillside conversation gave way to a more guarded awareness. As Red Hollow came into view, Cole spoke without looking at her. "The stagecoach arrives tomorrow. I told Mills I'd have an answer about the deputy position. By then—" Evelyn's heart quickened. "Have you decided?" He stopped walking, turning to face her directly. "That depends." "On what?" "On whether there's a reason for me to stay," he said, his gaze steady on hers. The question beneath the statement was clear. Evelyn felt the weight of it, the potential for joy, for connection, but also for heartbreak. Jonathan's death had taught her the cost of loving. Could she risk such loss again? Yet as she looked at Cole, standing patient and watchful before her, she realized that the greater risk lay in refusing to live fully, in denying the unexpected gift that had come to her when she least expected it. "There is," she said simply. Something in Cole's expression shifted, tension giving way to a quiet wonder. He reached for her hand, twining his fingers with hers, the first time they had walked so openly connected. As they approached town, several residents noticed their joined hands. Some nodded approval, others turned away with disapproving frowns. Neither Cole nor Evelyn paid them any mind, too absorbed in the significance of their own small revolution to concern themselves with its witnesses. That evening, as they parted at the apothecary door, Cole kissed her again, more briefly this time, but with no less meaning. "Tomorrow," he said, both promise and farewell. Evelyn watched him walk toward the boarding house, his figure silhouetted against the setting sun. She touched her lips, still feeling the gentle pressure of his kiss. Tomorrow would bring decisions, changes, the beginning of something neither of them had sought, but both now embraced. Inside, she removed the silver pocket watch from her pocket, where she had carried it since Cole had given it to her. Its hands remained frozen at 3:27, yet somehow it no longer seemed broken. Rather, it marked a moment suspended in time, the instant when everything changed, when possibility overcame
fear.
She placed it carefully on her bedside table before preparing for bed, the events of the day replaying in her mind like music. Outside, the wind carried dust and whispers through Red Hollow's streets. But for once, Evelyn was deaf to both. Her thoughts filled instead with wildflowers and the promise of tomorrow. The stagecoach arrived at noon, wheels churning dust as it rolled to a stop outside the Iron Horse Saloon. Cole stood on the boardwalk, watching passengers disembark, a drummer with sample cases, a young couple clutching each other's hands, an older gentleman in an Eastern suit that looked out of place against Red Hollow's weathered backdrop. Sheriff Mills approached, thumbs hooked in his belt. "Made your decision yet?" Cole nodded, feeling the weight of the tin star in his pocket, the permanent badge Mills had offered him that morning. "I'm staying." Mills clapped him on the shoulder. "Good man. Town needs someone like you." As the sheriff moved away to greet the stage driver, Cole's attention was drawn to the last passenger emerging from the coach, a woman in a fine traveling dress, her face obscured by a fashionable hat. Something about her posture triggered a distant memory, though he couldn't immediately place it. She turned, scanning the street, and Cole felt recognition hit him like a physical blow. Catherine Winters, Jacob's wife and partner in more than just marriage. She had evaded capture when Jacob was taken, disappearing with much of their ill-gotten gains. Her gaze found him, recognition flashing in her eyes before she quickly looked away, moving toward the hotel with measured steps. Cole's hand instinctively moved toward his gun, but he checked the motion. She hadn't been named in the wanted poster. No official charges had been filed against her, though he knew she was as guilty as her husband. Conflict roiled within him. His instinct was to confront her, to determine her purpose in Red Hollow. But he was no longer just a bounty hunter. He wore a deputy's badge now, with responsibilities beyond the pursuit of those who had broken the law elsewhere. He would watch and wait. Whatever Catherine Winters' purpose in Red Hollow, it couldn't be innocent. Jacob remained in custody hundreds of miles away, awaiting trial. Her appearance here now suggested unfinished business. Cole crossed the street toward the apothecary, needing to speak with Evelyn before doing anything else. The bell above. The door chimed as he entered, finding her at the counter measuring powders for a waiting customer. "Be with you in a moment," she said without looking up, focused on her task. The customer, Mrs. Peterson again, regarded Cole with undisguised curiosity. Word of his new position had spread quickly through town, and his relationship with Evelyn, while still undefined in public terms, was the subject of much speculation. "Deputy," Mrs. Peterson acknowledged with a nod. "Ma'am," Cole replied, hanging back until she had completed her purchase and departed. When they were alone, Evelyn, turned to him with a smile that faded as she noted his expression. "What's wrong?" "Catherine Winters just arrived on the stage," he said without preamble. "Jacob's wife. She was involved in his schemes but was never charged." Evelyn frowned. "Why would she come here? Jacob was taken weeks ago." "That's what I need to find out." Cole moved closer, lowering his voice though they were alone. "I took the deputy position, made it official this morning." Her eyes softened. "So you're staying?" "I'm staying," he confirmed, reaching for her hand. "But this situation with Catherine, I don't like it. She's dangerous in her way, maybe more than Jacob. She was the brains behind their operations." "What will you do?" "Watch her for now, see what she's after." He hesitated, then added, "I want you to be careful. Don't engage with her if she approaches you." Evelyn raised an eyebrow. "Do you think I'm in danger?" "Probably not," Cole admitted. But Jacob talked during the ride back to town, mentioned how his wife always blamed those who helped capture him, held grudges. Understanding dawned in Evelyn's eyes. "And you think she might hold me responsible because I helped you?" "It's unlikely," he said, not wanting to alarm her unnecessarily. "Just be aware." Before she could respond, the bell above the door chimed again. They turned to find Catherine Winters herself, standing in the doorway, an enigmatic smile playing at her lips. "Excuse me," she said, voice cultured and pleasant. "I was told this is where one might find medicinal remedies. I suffer terribly from travel sickness." Cole tensed, but Evelyn's hand on his arm steadied him. She stepped forward, professional, demeanor firmly in place. "Of course," she said. "I have several preparations that might help. What specifically troubles you? Nausea? Headache?" As the women discussed remedies, Cole observed Catherine closely. She showed no sign of recognizing him, her performance flawless. Yet he caught the calculating assessment beneath her polite inquiries, the way her gaze took in every detail of the apothecary and of Evelyn. "You're new to Red Hollow," Evelyn remarked, as she prepared a ginger tincture. "Just passing through," Catherine replied. "Visiting family in Santa Fe." The lie rolled smoothly off her tongue. Cole knew from Jacob's file that they had no family in the territories. "How long will you stay with us?" Evelyn asked, handing over the small bottle. "Just until the next stage," Catherine said. 3 days, I believe." She paid for the remedy, then turned those assessing eyes toward Cole. "Deputy," she acknowledged coolly, always reassuring to see the law present in these small towns. One never knows what dangers might lurk. The threat beneath her pleasant tone was unmistakable. Cole inclined his head slightly but said nothing, unwilling to engage in her game. After a moment, Catherine smiled again and departed. The bell, announcing her exit as it had her entrance. "She knows exactly who you are," Evelyn said once the door had closed. "Yes," Cole agreed grimly, "and she wants me to know she knows." "What now?" He moved to the window, watching Catherine cross the street toward the hotel. "Now I talk to Mills. We keep an eye on her, and you don't go anywhere alone until she's gone." Evelyn joined him at the window. "I've managed on my own for 3 years, Cole. I'm not helpless." "I know," he said, turning to face her, "but caring for someone means worrying about them. That's new territory for me. Allow me the adjustment period." The admission softened her expression. "For me as well," she acknowledged. "Caring, worrying." Cole touched her cheek gently. "We'll figure it out together." As he left to find Sheriff Mills, Cole felt the disorienting sensation of standing at a crossroads. Behind him lay the solitary path he had traveled for years: duty, pursuit, temporary connections. Before him stretched something unknown, both promising and terrifying in its potential. Catherine Winters represented the old path, pulling him back toward who he had been. Evelyn offered the possibility of who he might become. The choice seemed simple when framed that way, yet Cole knew that moving forward meant truly leaving the past behind, a step he had never fully taken. He touched the deputy's badge on his vest, feeling its unfamiliar weight. Perhaps it was time to stop running, to stand and face whatever came, not alone, but with someone beside him. The thought was as frightening as it was freeing. Cole squared his shoulders and continued toward the sheriff's office, decision crystallizing. With each step, he would protect this town, this woman, this new life he had unexpectedly found. Whatever Catherine Winters intended, she would find him changed from the solitary hunter she had known before. Changed, and perhaps stronger for it. The storm broke just after midnight, lightning splitting the sky above Red Hollow, thunder, rattling windows in their frames. Rain poured down in sheets, turning the main street to mud within minutes. Cole stood at his boarding house window, watching water cascade from rooftops and gather in pools at the bases of hitching posts. Something about the storm's fury matched his inner turmoil. After speaking with Sheriff Mills, they had agreed to monitor Catherine Winters but take no official action without cause. She had committed no crime in their jurisdiction. Suspicion was not enough to confront her. So Cole had spent the day watching, noting how she took meals alone in the hotel dining room, how she ventured out briefly to the telegraph office, how she observed the town with those calculating eyes. She was planning something. He was certain of it. A movement across the rain-soaked street caught his attention. A figure hurried through the downpour, heading toward the apothecary. Even through the curtain of rain, Cole recognized Catherine's distinctive posture. Alarm shot through him like a second bolt of lightning. He grabbed his gun belt and hat, not bothering with a coat despite the storm. Within moments, he was outside, rain plastering his shirt to his skin as he crossed the muddy street with long strides. By the time he reached the apothecary, Catherine had already disappeared inside. The front door was unlocked, unusual for this hour. Cole entered cautiously, water pooling beneath his boots on the wooden floor. The shop was dark, but a thin line of light showed beneath the door to the back room where Evelyn sometimes worked. Late. He moved silently across the shop, drawing his revolver. When he reached the door, he heard voices. Evelyn's calm but strained, Catherine's precise and cutting. "No right to threaten me in my own home," Evelyn was saying. "I'm simply proposing a mutually beneficial arrangement," Catherine replied. "You convince your bounty hunter to forget what he knows about me, and I leave you both in peace. He's not my bounty hunter. He's a deputy now. A wolf doesn't change its nature by wearing a different collar, Mrs. Hayes. He's a killer, same as my husband was, same as I am, when necessary." The naked threat galvanized Cole. He pushed open the door to find the women facing each other across Evelyn's work table. Catherine's back was to him, but he saw the small derringer in her hand, pointed steadily at Evelyn. "Put it down, Catherine," he said, voice deadly quiet. She stiffened but didn't turn or lower the gun. "Deputy Maddox, right on time." "I said put it down." Cole raised his revolver, aiming at the center of Catherine's back. "Whatever you're planning, it's over." "Is it?" she asked, a strange smile in her voice. "Tell me, Deputy, how does it feel to finally settle down, to find someone worth staying for? Does it ease the nightmares, the memories of all those men you've hunted, killed, captured?" "This isn't about me," Cole said evenly. "It's about you, threatening a woman who's done you no harm." "She harbors you," Catherine replied, as if that explained everything. "She gives you peace while my husband rots in a cell." "Your husband swindled innocent people," Evelyn interjected. "Cole did his job bringing him to justice." Catherine laughed, the sound brittle as breaking glass. "Justice? There's no justice in this world, only power and those clever enough to wield it." She shifted slightly, the derringer still trained on Evelyn. "I came to Red Hollow for one purpose, to make the man who took everything from me suffer as I have suffered." "By threatening Evelyn?" Cole took a step forward. That's your idea of justice? It's my idea of balance, Catherine corrected. You took what mattered to me, now I take what matters to you. The simplicity of her plan struck Cole like a physical blow. She had correctly identified his vulnerability, not his own safety, but Evelyn's. In finding connection, he had created a target for those who wished him harm. It won't work, he said, keeping his voice steady despite the fear churning within him. You harm her, you won't leave this room alive. Perhaps not, Catherine agreed, but you'll live knowing you caused her death by bringing your past to her door. As she spoke, a flash of lightning illuminated the room, followed immediately by a deafening crack of thunder. In that instant of brilliance, Cole saw Evelyn's hand move beneath the table, fingers closing around something he couldn't identify. Enough talk, Catherine said, finger tightening on the Derringer's trigger. Time to restore balance. Several things happened at once. Cole lunged forward, aiming to knock Catherine's arm aside. Evelyn threw something across the table, a small glass vial that shattered at Catherine's feet, releasing a cloud of fine powder, and thunder crashed again, seeming to shake the very foundations of the building. Catherine gasped, inhaling the powder involuntarily. She staggered, the Derringer wavering in her grip before slipping from suddenly nerveless fingers. Cole kicked the weapon aside as Catherine collapsed to her knees, eyes wide and unfocused. "What?" she slurred, reaching for the table edge, but missing. "Valerian and Poppy," Evelyn explained calmly, coming around the table. "Concentrated. Not enough to kill you, but more than enough to render you unconscious for several hours." Catherine struggled to rise, but managed only to slump further to the floor. Her eyelids fluttered as she fought to remain conscious. "You think this ends it," she mumbled. "There will be others. Men he's hunted, families seeking vengeance." Her words trailed off as the sedative took full effect. Cole checked her pulse, steady but slow. She would live, though she'd wake with a considerable headache. He looked up at Evelyn, who stood watching with a mixture of relief and residual fear on her face. "Are you all right?" She nodded, then surprised him by laughing softly. "I suppose. I'm a witch after all, potions and all." Cole rose, holstering his revolver before pulling her into his arms. She came willingly, her body trembling slightly against his. For a long moment, they simply held each other, the storm continuing its assault outside, rain lashing the windows in rhythmic waves. "I put you in danger," he finally said, voice rough with emotion. "My past—" "No," Evelyn interrupted, pulling back to look at him directly. "She made her choices. You made yours. I made mine." She touched his face, tracing the scar that marked his cheek. "I chose you, Cole Maddox, past and all." The simple declaration undid him. Cole pressed his forehead to hers, eyes closed against the surge of feeling that threatened to overwhelm him. For so long he had been defined by motion, by pursuit. To be chosen, to be wanted not in spite of who he was, but because of it. The gift seemed too great to comprehend. "I don't deserve you," he whispered. "Probably not," Evelyn agreed with unexpected humor, "but you have me nonetheless." They stood together in the eye of their own storm, the unconscious Catherine at their feet, a symbol of the dangers that might still come, yet no longer faced alone. Later, after Sheriff Mills had been summoned and Catherine taken to the jail, Cole and Evelyn sat at her kitchen table, mugs of hot coffee warming their hands as the storm gradually subsided outside. Dawn was still hours away, but neither felt inclined toward sleep. "Will she be charged?" Evelyn asked. "Breaking and entering, attempted assault with a deadly weapon, threatening an officer of the law," Cole listed. "It's enough to hold her, until the marshal can take her to stand trial alongside Jacob." Evelyn nodded, relief evident in the relaxing of her shoulders. She was right about one thing, though. "What's that?" "Your past will follow you," she said gently. "There may be others." Cole acknowledged this with a nod. "I can leave." "If that would be safer for you." "Don't you dare," she replied with unexpected fierceness. "We face it together now." The resolve in her voice left no room for argument. Cole reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "Together, then," he agreed. As first light began to seep through the windows, they remained at the table, hands joined, silence comfortable between them. Outside, Red Hollow emerged from the storm. Dust turned temporarily to mud, air washed clean of lingering secrets and whispers. A new day approached, uncertain in its details, but no longer faced in solitude. 2 months passed. Summer settled over Red Hollow like a heavy blanket, heat rising in visible waves from the packed dirt of the main street. Evelyn's garden flourished against all odds, her careful tending coaxing life from the reluctant soil. Cole settled into his role as deputy, his initial awkwardness with the badge giving way to a natural authority that earned the town's respect. Catherine Winters had been transferred to territorial custody, transported to stand trial alongside her husband. Their departure had lifted a weight from the town, though Cole remained vigilant, aware that other ghosts from his past might eventually find their way to Red Hollow. The town's attitude toward Cole and Evelyn's relationship had gradually shifted from scandal to acceptance. They maintained separate residences, Cole still at the boarding house, Evelyn above her apothecary, but their connection was undisguised, evident in shared meals, Sunday walks, and the way their eyes sought each other across rooms. On a particularly sweltering afternoon, Cole sat on the bench outside the sheriff's office, ostensibly watching the street, but actually observing Evelyn as she crossed from the general store to the apothecary, basket over her arm. Even in simple movements, she captivated him, the straightness of her spine, the purposeful rhythm of her steps, the quiet dignity that surrounded her like an aura. Sheriff Mills emerged from the office, settling beside Cole with a grunt. "Peaceful day," he observed, following Cole's gaze. "Too hot for trouble." Cole nodded, shifting to make room on the shaded bench. "Town's quieter than when I arrived." "Having a second lawman helps," Mills acknowledged. "Folks know there's always someone watching." They sat in companionable silence for a few minutes, watching heat shimmer above the street. A dog ambled past, tongue lolling as it sought shade beneath the saloon's awning. "Been meaning to ask," Mills finally said, staring straight ahead. "What are your intentions toward Mrs. Hayes?" The blunt question might have offended Cole months ago. Now, from this man who had offered him a place in the community, it seemed appropriate. "Honorable," Cole replied simply. Mills nodded, apparently satisfied. "Good. Town needs more stable families, proper ones." The implication was clear enough. Red Hollow would accept their relationship, but there were expectations about its formalization. Cole wasn't surprised. He had been considering the same matter himself. "I have something to tend to," he said, rising from the bench. "Mind watching." "Things a bit longer?" Mills waved him off. "Nothing to watch but dust settling. Go on." Cole crossed to the general store, where Old Man Thornton greeted him with a nod. "Deputy, Mr. Thornton, I'm looking for something." Cole hesitated, suddenly unsure how to articulate his need. The storekeeper's eyes twinkled with understanding. "Something for a lady, perhaps?" Cole nodded, grateful for the older man's perception. "Got some new ribbons in last week," Thornton offered, moving toward a display case. "Or perhaps something more permanent?" He unlocked the case, revealing a small selection of jewelry, modest pieces appropriate for a frontier town. Among them lay a simple silver band, unadorned but finely crafted. "That," Cole said without hesitation, pointing to the ring, "if it's sized for a lady's hand." "Can be adjusted if needed," Thornton assured him, removing the ring from the case. "Fine choice. simple but lasting, like some relationships. As Cole paid for the ring, tucking it carefully into his vest pocket, the storekeeper added casually, "Mrs. Hayes usually closes the apothecary around sunset, takes a walk by the creek afterward when the day cools." Cole smiled at the thinly veiled suggestion. In a town the size of Red Hollow, little remained private for long. "Much obliged for the information," he said. The afternoon crawled by, each minute stretching like molasses in August. Cole performed his duties with outward calm, checking on businesses, resolving a minor dispute between neighboring ranchers, assisting Mrs. Peterson when her wagon wheel broke outside the telegraph office. All the while, the ring in his pocket seemed to burn against his chest, a small circle of possibility and promise. As the sun finally began its descent, painting Red Hollow in golden light, Cole made his way toward the creek that ran along the town's eastern edge. The path was well worn, used by townspeople seeking relief from the heat or a quiet place for contemplation. He found Evelyn sitting on a fallen log, her shoes set neatly beside her as she cooled her feet in the shallow water. Her hair had come, partially loose from its customary knot, copper strands catching the light like threads of fire. She looked up at his approach, a smile warming her features. "I thought you'd be busy until evening." Some things take priority," he replied, settling beside her on the log. "Mills is watching the town." "Is something wrong?" she asked, noting the unusual tension in his posture. Cole shook his head, gathering his thoughts. Words had never come easily to him, and now they seemed more elusive than ever. Instead of speaking, he reached into his pocket and withdrew the silver ring, holding it in his palm where she could see it. Evelyn's breath caught audibly. She looked from the ring to his face, eyes wide with question. "I'm not a man of grand gestures or fine speeches," Cole said, voice low and earnest. "But I know what matters to me now. You matter, this place, the life we might build together." He held the ring between thumb and forefinger. "If you'll have me." Tears welled in Evelyn's eyes, catching the sunset light. For a terrible moment, Cole feared he had misunderstood everything, pushed too far or too soon. Then her hand covered his, closing his fingers around the ring. "Ask me properly," she whispered. Cole slid from the log to one knee beside the creek, earth damp beneath him, her hand still clasping his. "Evelyn Hayes," he said, his hunter's steady voice finally betraying emotion. "Will you marry me?" "Yes," she replied simply, the single word carrying the weight of all they had survived to reach this moment. Cole slipped the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit, as if meant for her all along. Then he rose, drawing her to her feet and into his arms. Their kiss tasted of joy and relief, and possibilities neither had dared imagine when dust first carried him into Red Hollow. When they finally parted, Evelyn rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heart. "What will people say?" she murmured, though her tone suggested she cared little for the answer. "That it's about time," Cole replied, making her laugh. They stood together as twilight deepened around them, the creek's gentle music a backdrop to their private celebration. Cole thought of the path that had led him here, years of movement without destination, pursuing others without finding himself. How strange that stillness had finally brought him what restless motion never could. "We should tell Sheriff Mills first," Evelyn said, as they reluctantly prepared to return to town. "He's been a good friend to us both." Cole agreed, though he suspected Mills already knew. Little happened in Red Hollow without the sheriff's awareness. They walked back toward town hand in hand, no longer concerned with appearances or whispers. The first stars appeared above them, pinpricks of light in the deepening blue. Ahead, lamps were being lit in windows, warm yellow squares against the gathering darkness. For the first time in his adult life, Cole felt the pull of home. Not as a place left behind, but as something being created with each step forward. The pocket watch that Evelyn still carried, frozen at 3:27, no longer seemed a symbol of something broken, but rather of a moment preserved in amber, the exact instant when everything had changed for the better. The wedding took place on a Sunday afternoon in early autumn, when the worst of summer's heat had relented and the first hints of gold touched the cottonwoods along the creek. The entire town gathered for the occasion, the church filled beyond capacity with residents spilling onto the small porch and yard beyond. Evelyn wore a simple dress of deep blue, her hair arranged with sprigs of sage and wildflowers gathered. That morning, Cole had purchased a new shirt and string tie for the occasion, looking slightly uncomfortable with the formality, but determined to honor the significance of the day. Sheriff Mills stood as Cole's witness, while Mrs. Thornton attended. Evelyn. The ceremony itself was brief, the pastor's words traditional yet somehow made new by the evident devotion between bride and groom. When they exchanged vows, Cole's voice carried to the farthest corner of the church, clear and unwavering. Evelyn's response was softer but equally certain, her eyes never leaving his face. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the pastor concluded, beaming at the couple. "Mr. Maddox, you may kiss your bride." Cole lifted Evelyn's hand to his lips first, pressing a kiss to the silver band that now shared space with a simple gold wedding ring. Then he drew her gently forward, one hand cradling her cheek as he sealed their union with a kiss that balanced tenderness with restrained passion. The celebration afterwards spread throughout the town, tables set up outside the church laden with food contributed by every household. Music spilled from the saloon, where Thomas the bartender had rolled the piano onto the boardwalk. Children ran between adults, playing tag and stealing cookies when they thought no one was looking. As evening approached, Cole found Evelyn standing slightly apart from the festivities, watching the community with a mixture of joy and wonder on her face. "Having second thoughts?" he asked, only half joking as he joined her. She shook her head, leaning into him when he slipped an arm around her waist. "Just remembering how it was before, how they looked at me after Jonathan died, how alone I felt." She turned to face him. "And now this. It's like a dream." "If it is," Cole said, "I hope we never wake from it." Sheriff Mills approached, carrying 2 glasses of whiskey. He handed one to Cole and raised the other in toast. "To new beginnings," he said, "and to Red Hollow's future." They drank to the sentiment, the liquor warming Cole's throat. The sheriff studied them both with paternal satisfaction before continuing more seriously. "Got a proposition for you." "Cole, been thinking about retirement. These old bones aren't what they used to be." He gestured toward his badge. "Town needs a sheriff who'll be around for the long haul, someone folks respect." Cole stared at him, understanding dawning slowly. "You're offering me your position?" Mills nodded. "Town council agrees, vote was unanimous." The offer represented more than just a promotion. It was complete acceptance, a final acknowledgement that Cole's past as a bounty hunter had been set aside in favor of a new identity. Sheriff of Red Hollow, husband to Evelyn, member of a community, rather than a solitary hunter. "I'd be honored," Cole said, extending his hand to the older man, "and grateful for your guidance during the transition." "Not much to it," Mills replied with a wry smile. "Keep the peace, protect what matters. You've been doing that since you arrived." As the sheriff moved away to rejoin the celebration, Evelyn squeezed Cole's hand. "Sheriff Maddox," she said, testing the title. "It suits you." "More than I expected it to," he admitted. "When I rode into Red Hollow, I never imagined—" He gestured to encompass the town, the celebration, their joined hands. "Life seldom follows the paths we imagine for ourselves," Evelyn observed. "Sometimes it leads us to better destinations than we could have planned." As darkness fell, Lanterns were lit throughout the town square, creating pools of golden light, within which couples began to dance to the music still flowing from the saloon's piano. Cole watched for a moment, then turned to his wife with an outstretched hand. "Mrs. Maddox," he said formally, "may I have this dance?" Surprise and pleasure flickered across Evelyn's face. "I didn't know you danced." "I don't," he confessed, with a small smile. "But I'm willing to learn." She placed her hand in his, allowing him to lead her into the circle of dancers. Their movements were hesitant at first, finding rhythm and connection. But as with everything between them, what began awkwardly soon found its natural grace, each step, each turn becoming more fluid as they learned to move as one. Around them, the town observed with approving smiles. Mrs. Peterson leaned toward, Mrs. Thornton whispering behind her hand, "Who would have thought, our witch woman and the bounty hunter?" "Sheriff now," Mrs. Thornton corrected. "And she was never a witch, just a woman with knowledge that scared small minds." The music shifted to a slower tempo. Cole drew Evelyn closer, her head coming to rest against his shoulder as they swayed. Together beneath the stars, the silver pocket watch nestled in her dress pocket, a tangible reminder of how broken things could find new purpose, new meaning. Later, as they walked toward the apothecary, their home now, with Cole's few possessions moved in that morning, the town quieted around them. The celebration would continue into the night for some, but for the newly married couple, the most important part of the day was yet to come. Cole paused on the threshold, then swept Evelyn into his arms with unexpected ease, carrying her across and closing the door behind them with his foot. She laughed at the traditional gesture, arms twined around his neck. "Welcome home," she said, as he set her gently on her feet. "Home," he repeated, the word still new and precious on his tongue. I like the sound of that. As night deepened around Red Hollow, two people who had known profound solitude discovered the greater intimacy that comes when souls recognize each other across time and circumstance. Their union was neither the beginning nor the end of their story, but rather a waypoint on a journey neither had expected to share, yet both now embraced with open hearts and joined hands. 1 year later, spring returned to Red Hollow with unexpected generosity. Rains had come through the winter, more plentiful than in living memory, transforming the landscape that surrounded the town. Where once dust had ruled unchallenged, wildflowers now spread in riotous patches of color, purple lupine, orange poppies, yellow sunflowers reaching toward the sky. Evelyn's garden had expanded beyond the confines of the apothecary's small yard, now stretching along the eastern edge of town. Where the creek provided natural irrigation, vegetables grew alongside medicinal herbs, providing food for the community as well as healing. Several of the town's women had joined her endeavor, learning the properties of plants under her patient instruction. The apothecary itself had changed as well, expanding into the vacant building next door. One room was now dedicated to treating patients, with a proper examination table and improved lighting. Another held classes where Evelyn shared her knowledge of herbal medicine with anyone willing to learn. The suspicious whispers that had once followed her had transformed into respectful consultation. Cole's transition from deputy to sheriff had been equally successful. Under his leadership, Red Hollow had developed a reputation as a town where the law was applied fairly but firmly. New settlers had been drawn by the stability he provided, and businesses that had struggled now flourished in the growing community. Their home above the apothecary had been renovated, walls removed to create larger area spaces filled with books, plants, and the simple, sturdy furniture Cole crafted in his spare time. Each piece represented hours of careful work, a table where they shared meals, shelves that held Evelyn's expanding collection of medical texts, a cradle that awaited its future occupant with patient anticipation. On this particular morning, Sheriff Cole Maddox stood on the front porch of his home, watching the town come to life below. Shops were opening, children running toward the newly established schoolhouse, wagons arriving with goods from larger settlements to the east. Pride mingled with wonder as he observed the community he had sworn to protect, a community that had, against all odds, become his own. The door opened behind him, and Evelyn joined him on the porch, a cup of coffee in each hand. She wore a loose dress of soft green, designed to accommodate her changing form. At 5 months along, her pregnancy was clearly visible, a gentle curve beneath the fabric. "You're up early," she observed, handing him one of the cups. Cole accepted it gratefully, breathing in the fragrant steam. "Couldn't sleep. Too much. On my mind." Evelyn smiled knowingly. "You're worrying again." "Sheriff's prerogative," he replied, though his expression softened as he looked at her. "How are you feeling this morning?" "Strong," she said, one hand resting on her belly where their child grew. "The morning sickness has finally passed." They stood together, watching the sunrise paint Red Hollow in shades of gold and amber. A year of marriage had deepened their connection in ways neither could have articulated. The easy silence between them as comfortable as conversation, each gesture and glance its own language. "I heard from Marshal Davis yesterday," Cole said, after a while. "Catherine Winters escaped custody during transfer to the territorial prison." Evelyn's hand tightened on her cup. "Do you think she'll come here?" "Eventually," he admitted, "but not soon. Davis thinks she's headed to Mexico first." "Then we have time?" "Yes." Cole set down his coffee and turned to face her fully. "But when she does come, or anyone else from my past, I need to know you'll do exactly as we've discussed. Take the horse and ride for Miller's ranch. Don't wait for me." The protectiveness that had once seemed stifling to Evelyn now registered as love's most tangible expression. She reached for his hand, placing it against the swell of her stomach, where their child occasionally made its presence known with flutter-like movements. "We'll be careful," she promised. "But remember that I chose this life, chose you, with open eyes. The dangers that come with loving you are part of that choice." Cole pulled her gently into his arms, mindful of her condition. "I never deserved you," he murmured against her hair. "Probably not," she agreed with familiar humor. "But you have me nonetheless." Later that day, as afternoon shadows lengthened across the main street, Cole completed his daily rounds of the town. He checked on the new schoolhouse, where construction was nearly finished, spoke with ranchers about recent coyote sightings, and settled a minor property dispute between neighboring businesses. Routine tasks, mundane even, yet each interaction reinforced the web of connections that now defined his life. Where once he had valued independence above all else, he now understood the strength found in community, in shared purpose, in belonging. As he approached the apothecary, he observed Evelyn through the front window, instructing Mrs. Peterson's daughter in the preparation of a poultice. The girl listened with the same attentiveness others once reserved for sermon, carefully mimicking Evelyn's movements, knowledge passing from one generation to the next, legacy in its purest form. Cole paused outside, reluctant to interrupt. From his vest pocket, he withdrew the silver pocket watch, recently repaired by a watchmaker passing through town. Its hands now moved with steady purpose, keeping accurate time after years of symbolic stillness. Evelyn had insisted on the repair, arguing that objects, like people, deserved second chances. "Some things are meant to be useful again," she had said, "not just reminders of what was lost." The watch ticked softly in his palm, 3:27, no longer frozen, but simply one moment among many in the continuous flow of time. Cole smiled at the metaphor. How fitting that the object that had symbolized his arrested life now represented its renewal. He returned the watch to his pocket and entered the apothecary, bell chiming his arrival. Evelyn looked up, her face Brightening at the sight of him, the student continued her work, intent on proving her aptitude. "Sheriff," Evelyn greeted him formally, though her eyes conveyed a more intimate welcome. "Mrs. Maddox," he returned with equal formality. "May I escort you on a walk when your lessons are completed? The wildflowers along the creek are exceptional today." "I would like that very much," she replied, a private smile curving her lips. An hour later, they walked hand in hand along the creek path, now widened and improved by town effort. Wildflowers bordered the trail in extravagant profusion, their scents filling the air with sweetness. In the distance, Red Hollow spread beneath the late afternoon sun, buildings gleaming golden in the slanting light. Cole paused at a bend in the creek, where a lone juniper tree provided shade and privacy. From his pocket, he produced a small, carved wooden box, offering it to Evelyn with uncharacteristic shyness. "What's this?" she asked, accepting the box with curious fingers. "Open it," he encouraged. Inside, nestled on a bed of soft cloth, lay a silver locket, simple in design but finely crafted. Evelyn lifted it carefully, eyes questioning. "I noticed you stopped wearing Jonathan's," Cole explained. "I thought perhaps—" Evelyn touched her throat where her first husband's locket had hung for years, removed months ago by her own choice. "It was time," she said softly. "He'll always be part of my past, but my present, my future, belongs to us." With gentle fingers, she opened the new locket. Inside was a miniature rendering of Red Hollow's main street, painted with delicate precision. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "Our home." "The other side is empty," Cole said. "I thought when the baby comes—" Tears welled in Evelyn's eyes, pregnancy making her more susceptible to emotion. "It's perfect. Will you help me put it on?" Cole fastened the locket around her neck, his calloused fingers surprisingly deft with the tiny clasp. Evelyn touched it where it rested against her collarbone, the silver warm from his hands. "Thank you," she said, reaching up to cradle his face. "For this? For everything." He turned his head to press a kiss into her palm. "I'd give you the world if I could." "You already have," she replied simply. They continued their walk as the day waned toward evening, discussing names for their child, plans for the future, concerns both practical and profound. Ordinary conversation made extraordinary by the journey that had brought them to this moment, a scarred bounty hunter and a widowed healer, finding in each other the completion neither had sought, but both had needed. As they neared the edge of town, the wind picked up slightly, carrying a hint of dust from the plains beyond, a reminder of the harsher world that still existed outside their haven. But rather than shrinking from it, they faced the wind together, shoulders touching, hands joined. Whatever came, Catherine Winters, other ghosts from Cole's past, the natural challenges of life itself, they would meet it as they had met everything since fate had carried him into Red Hollow on a cloud of dust and purpose. Not alone, but together. Not in fear, but in the quiet courage that grows from being truly known and loved despite one's scars. The silver pocket watch ticked steadily in Cole's pocket. The silver locket gleamed at Evelyn's throat. Time, moving. Forward. Legacy taking shape. Love against all odds, blooming like wildflowers after rain, persistent, resilient, transformative. And Red Hollow watched over them all, no longer just a stopping point on a journey elsewhere, but a destination in itself, a place of dust and bloom, gunsmoke and healing, past shadows and future promise, a place called home.